When Karoline Leavitt sat down for her interview, she anticipated a spirited debate. What she didn't see coming was a moment so explosive that it would completely unravel the reputation of one of television's most prominent hosts. And it all played out live on air.
First of all, it takes someone 5 minutes to Google Jake Tapper, Donald Trump, to see that Jake Tapper has consistently frequently likened President Trump to Adolf Hitler.
Ma'am, I'm going to stop this interview if you continue to attack my colleagues. I would like to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who you work for.
Yes.
If you are here to speak on his behalf, I am willing to have this conversation.
I am stating facts that your colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay,
now,
I'm sorry, guys. We're going to come back out to the panel. Karoline.
This wasn't a pre-taped segment where producers could trim the footage or reshape the narrative. There was no safety net, no opportunity to walk anything back. It was raw, unfiltered, and happening in real time.
I will say it's very easy to speak truth from this podium when you have a president who is implementing policies that are wildly popular with the American people, and that's exactly what this administration is doing. It's correcting the lies and the wrongs of the past 4 years, many of the lies that have been told to your faces in this very briefing room. I will not do that.
Karoline had been invited onto the Morning Current, a political talk show known for its heated debates and a host who thrived on confrontation. Sitting across from her was Paul Danning, a seasoned journalist with a reputation for being aggressive. His interviews weren't just about getting answers, they were about dominating the conversation. He didn't just press buttons, he slammed them. But today, he faced a rising conservative voice who wasn't easily rattled. She came ready. The segment began as expected. Paul questioned Karoline's views on media bias, accusing conservative outlets of spreading misinformation while insisting that networks like his were merely setting the record straight. Karoline didn't flinch. She fired back with precise examples highlighting instances where mainstream media had distorted facts, omitted crucial details, or even deliberately misled the public. The exchange was intense, but professional, the kind of sharp debate viewers had come to expect. For a moment, it seemed like just another political discussion. But then, something changed. Paul leaned in, his expression hardening, his tone sharpening. In an instant, the entire conversation took a turn that no one, not Karoline, not the audience, not even the network executives had anticipated. Paul's demeanor, once firm but controlled, became something else entirely. This wasn't just a debate anymore, it was personal. Frustration seeped into his voice, his words carrying an unmistakable edge. "People like you," he said, his tone laced with accusation, "are the reason this country is falling apart. You push this false narrative of victimhood, acting like conservatives are being silenced, when in reality, you're the ones silencing everyone else." The studio fell into a stunned silence. The usual back and forth of debate had morphed into something far more intense, something charged, something dangerous. Karoline blinked, her posture steady, but her eyes locked onto Paul like a blade. She had handled tough interviews before, but this was different. She let the moment stretch, the tension thickening in the air before she finally spoke. "Excuse me?" Her voice was steady, calm, but there was no mistaking the challenge in her words. Paul didn't back down. If anything, he dug in deeper. "You act like free speech is under attack, but what you really want is control. Your people." He stopped himself mid-sentence, but the damage was already done. The atmosphere in the studio shifted instantly. Producers, who had been casually watching, suddenly exchanged uneasy glances. Crew members tensed, sensing that this moment was about to escalate into something far bigger. And Karoline, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. She simply asked, "Would you like to clarify what you mean by your people?" The weight of her question filled the room. The tension became almost suffocating. Paul hesitated just for a second, but on live television, a second was all it took. In television, every second counts. The cameras were rolling and the entire world was watching. Paul Danning, a man known for never backing down, had built his career on controlling conversations and steering them wherever he pleased. But this time, he lost control. The moment he uttered those two words, "your people," the entire atmosphere in the studio shifted. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was a statement filled with weight, the kind that could be clipped, analyzed, and replayed endlessly on the internet. Karoline was aware of this. Rather than react impulsively, she remained composed, folding her hands in her lap, giving him the opportunity to either clarify or dig himself deeper. Paul took a sharp breath, quickly defending himself. "I meant conservatives," he said, too hastily, almost rehearsed. "People like you, who push an agenda of grievance instead of progress." Karoline tilted her head, her voice calm and measured as she responded. "So, just to clarify, when you said your people, you were only referring to political ideology." Paul's lips tightened. He had been in the game long enough to know when he was walking into a trap. If he resisted, it would only reinforce what people were already suspecting. Admitting it was a mistake would make him seem weak. So, like many experienced individuals, he tried to shift the focus. "Oh, come on, Karoline," he scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Don't play the victim here." He let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "This is exactly what I mean, this bad faith outrage. You know what I meant, but instead of engaging with the real issue, you're twisting my words and making it all about you." Karoline didn't flinch. She wasn't about to let him shift the conversation. Her gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "I don't need to twist anything, Paul." The tension in the room was palpable, and the real storm was only beginning. "Your words speak for themselves." A flicker of something crossed Paul's face, perhaps irritation, or maybe even a hint of regret, but he was already too deep in the moment to pull back. So instead, he made a critical mistake. "You know what?" he snapped. "Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing something to society, we wouldn't be having this conversation." There it was, a sweeping, arrogant statement broadcasted live for the entire world to hear. The silence that followed was suffocating, not just in the studio, but also across the screens of thousands, soon millions, watching in real time. Even Paul seemed to realize the gravity of his words as soon as they left his mouth. He opened his lips, likely attempting to soften the impact, but it was too late. Karoline let the weight of his statement linger in the air before responding. "Are you saying conservatives don't contribute to society?" Paul exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders back, his frustration barely contained. "I'm saying this endless complaining about being canceled is exhausting." Karoline nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. She didn't argue, didn't push back. She didn't have to, because in that moment, the damage was already done, and within minutes, the clip was everywhere. It didn't take long. The moment this segment ended, the first snippets hit social media. 15-second clip, just enough to go viral. Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing to society. The words spread like wildfire. There was no stopping it now. No context, no build-up, just that one line. Within an hour, hashtags began trending. Hashtag FirePaul, DANNING. Hashtag Media Bias Exposed. Hashtag Karoline Leavitt. Social media exploded, splitting into two camps. Some condemned Paul for what they saw as outright disrespect, while others rushed to defend him, claiming his words were taken out of context. But when the full-length clip surfaced, it didn't help his case, if anything. It made things worse. Political commentators across the spectrum jumped in. Some outright denounced him, calling it blatant media arrogance, while others tried to reframe the backlash as selective outrage. But regardless of the perspective, one thing was clear: people were watching. Then, the sponsors got involved. By midday, 3 major advertisers for the Morning Current had suspended their partnerships, releasing carefully worded statements about reassessing their commitments to the network. By evening, that number had risen to 8. The network was in full-blown crisis mode. Paul, K. He stayed silent at least for now. But the network, T. They had a disaster on their hands. Karoline, on the other hand, didn't need to say a word. She simply retweeted the clip, adding nothing but a thinking face emoji. But the storm was far from over. Inside NBC's news headquarters, the network behind the Morning Current executives were in panic mode. The outrage wasn't fading, it was growing. Viewers flooded the network's inbox, demanding immediate action. Advertisers weren't just pausing their sponsorships anymore, they were cutting ties completely. And to make matters worse, rival networks seized the moment, using Paul Danning's remarks as the latest example of media bias and recklessness. By mid-morning, an emergency meeting was called. The network had 2 choices: stand by Paul and risk an even greater fallout, or cut him loose to protect their brand. For years, Paul had been one of their biggest stars, a veteran journalist known for his hard-hitting interviews. But now, he was a liability. At 3 p.m., the decision was made.